thank you everybody for joining. My name is Jess Fairfax from the Werribee River Association, and I just wanted to acknowledge that tonight I'm broadcasting, zooming from the lands of the Wadawurrung, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We are really excited to be able to run this session tonight. Obviously, dredging in Werribee South is pretty relevant to the Werribee River, being at the mouth of the river, coming out to Port Phillip Bay, and a lot of our community have sort of expressed some interest in wanting to know more about it, even ourselves. And so the lovely folk at Parks Vic took some time out a few weeks ago and had a bit of a conversation with us and really made things a lot clearer for us, and we thought that it would be wonderful to be able to share that with the community and to our members. So hence we've made this webinar tonight for everyone to come along and hear a little bit more about one, the dredging, why it happens, but then also a little bit about the upgrade to the boating ramp in Werribee South, and we'll also hear about the foreshore management plan as well. I am recording this session because we do have a little podcast channel, so we'll be putting it up on there to sort of get a little bit more exposure for it. There will be an opportunity for questions to be answered following on from the presentations. So if you do have questions throughout, please pop them into the group chat. Hannah there from Parks Vic will be responding to some of those, but obviously we also want to bring them up for conversation. So we'll be picking some of those questions out and presenting them to our presenters this evening. So first up, we are going to be getting a presentation from Simon Marangio. Now that did I say your name right? Your last name? Good. Now we've got audio and everything working from Simon. He's the Port Services Officer at Parks Vic. And following on from Simon, we'll be hearing from Edward Allan, who's the Project Manager of Better Boating at Victorian Fisheries Authority. So he will be talking about that upgrade to the boating ramp there. And then Sue Neal from Wyndham City Council, the coastal planner, will be talking about that foreshore management plan. So yeah, please write those questions in the chat as we go, and we will get to them following on from the presentation. So Simon, if you're ready, I think you should be able to click share screen and hopefully it all works.
Wish me luck. Thank you. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, let's see how that goes. Okay, I can't tell what you're seeing, so we're just going to have to wing it. So just double check that. Yep, that's what we want to see. Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Jess, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm coming to you from Gunnakurnai country. I'm actually currently on a fire deployment to Hayfield, so I'm not in my usual chair that I would be. So, but tonight I did want to just touch briefly on a few aspects of Parks Victoria's maintenance dredging program and how it plays a role in keeping people safe when they're boating, but also building some resilience along our beaches of Port Phillip and Western Port. Firstly, just quickly, just want to touch on some aspects of Parks Victoria, particularly the maritime side of Parks Victoria. Parks Victoria is a statutory authority, and we're responsible for managing over 4 million hectares of parks and reserves, including 70% of Victoria's coastline. We're also the local port manager for Port Phillip, Western Port and Port Campbell. As the local port manager, we're responsible for providing safe access to local port facilities such as boat ramps, piers and harbours. Now we can do that in a number of ways. We can provide or assign boating zones and provide navigation aids and maintain those, and signage, and also navigation channels like at the entrance to Werribee River, which is why there is a channel there. Hopefully we go on to the next slide. There we go. There are a number of sites around Port Phillip and Western Port that we have to maintain the navigable depth at, and we monitor these as well. So And we do this as part of Parks Victoria's maintenance dredging program. There are 10 sites all up, which you can see on the map if you look closely, and hopefully that's clear enough for you. To give you an understanding of how often we may need to dredge some of these sites, two of them, Queenscliff and Patterson River, actually require dredging between 5 and 8 times a year, which is quite a fair bit, but it gives you an understanding of how active those areas are as far as sand movement. We also have to do the entrance to Mordialloc Creek about 3 times, and the remaining sites only need maintenance about once every 12 months, stretching out to as long as once every 10 or 15 years. So in comparison, over the last 20 years or so, the entrance to Werribee River has needed dredging about once every 18 to 24 months. And I should point out that this is all very localised, small-scale works, and in the removal of sand to keep things safe. So why do we need to keep maintaining sites? Well, many local port facilities are either provide access through or have been established within active coastal environments, and the sand that naturally moves through that area sometimes needs to be managed. Hazards like sandbars and spits and shallowing or narrowing of channels can take many years to form, or they could occur in as little as a few days under the right conditions. Earlier in the year, I was down at Werribee South, and I spoke to a fisherman down there, and about the sand spit that was forming opposite the jetty. And he said he'd been fishing one day during what he described as a stiff southerly, and he said it grew by about 4 or 5 metres in just a few hours, that spit. So it gives you an understanding the power of nature and how quickly things can change. So we do use a range of tools in this program to help inform and manage the operational aspects of it. And each site to be maintained has a set of service specifications. And these depict how it is monitored, what will trigger the need for any maintenance dredging to occur or any other works to occur, how it will be dredged, how deep it will be dredged, along with where and how the sand will be deposited. So, and they're fairly strict sort of guidelines that we keep to. One of those tools includes hydrographic surveys, because hazards are not always visible. And hydrographic surveys help us to see what's below the waterline and gives us some good information about how much sand has accumulated and where that might be. We then translate this information into our planning response process. So getting to the more obvious elements of the program. So when we do need to remove sand to like a sandbar or shallowing, we use what's called a cutter suction dredge. Now, some of you that are locals down at Werribee Way may have seen this before. This is our dredge. It's owned and managed by a contractor that we engage for these activities. And on the front of it, it has a cutting head. Now, this is not actually our cutting head. Our cutting head is a little bit different, but it gives you an idea of what is on the cutting, what is on the arm or the front arm on the dredge, and that's what agitates the sand. And the sand is then sucked up through a siphon, through a pipe, and then through a pump, and it goes out the back of the dredge and then is pumped onto shore. And we do also use like a long reach excavator and other equipment from time to time. So sand disposal is probably the most visible aspect of this whole process, and look, quite frankly, it doesn't matter which site in Port Phillip or where in Port Phillip we're at. The sand always comes out looking dark grey or black. And this is because marine sand contains a lot of sediments like silt, seaweed and other organic material. I find myself, when I'm on site, I regularly have to explain to people that the sand naturally looks that way when it first comes out of the water. It can be a little confronting for some people, but we do undertake regular sediment sampling at all of our sites to make sure that the sand is still safe and suitable for to be deposited on beaches. So it's not contaminated. That's just what the sand looks like. And we've found that all of our sites, that after some time of exposure to sun and wind and tides, it will eventually transform to what probably people are more used to what a sandy beach looks like. And I do sometimes have to point out to people that the beach they're standing on when we're having this discussion was re-nourished in the same way, probably sometimes even only a few weeks or months earlier. So, you know, they see that and think it'll never change. And then, you know, I can point to their feet and say, well, look, this is actually what it looks like now after some time. So sand is quite an amazing thing. So, yes, why don't all beaches look? There's because not all beaches are the same, and some very key elements are involved in determining what a beach looks like. And I've listed probably quite a few of them here, but sand at each of our sites that we maintain, they all have their own unique characteristics, which are influenced by a whole range of things, most of which I've put here. But these factors that I've listed here are also considered when we seek approval to put sand on the beach, and when we're doing our sediment sampling programs. We consider the direction that there might be coastal processes operating in at a certain time of the year. There are some parts of Port Phillip where the sand, the net amount of sand moves in one direction, and as the season changes to like a summer or winter, it will move in a different direction. So, and that's not unusual. At Werribee South, we're only allowed to put sand on the beach at Werribee South in that area, at that location. So some sites have two locations because there's a very distinct directional change at different times of the year. So we need to be able to have an option on where to put it. But for most sites, sand placement on adjoining beaches has actually become quite a crucial thing for stabilising erosion and ensuring that the dredged sand actually remains within the coastal processes so it can go on and we don't interfere with that. So you might notice that on the lower, the bottom picture there, there's a yellow line. Hopefully most of you can pick it up on your screens. That's actually where the low water mark was in 2020. So you can see the difference of, and there had been a bit of I think almost a hiatus of 2 years where we didn't need to dredge prior to that. So there was a fair bit of erosion on the beach, and it was coming quite close to the vegetation and the grass area. This is a recent photo, so we have put a fair bit of sand on the beach in recent times, and so you can see the difference there. And I think I'll leave it at that. Happy to take questions though.
Oh, thanks, Simon. So yeah, Hannah's probably just done a bit of an answer, and you did draw on it in the presentation. Sorry, your name is not coming up. It's just a really long link. But they were asking, yeah, about the testing of that, what comes up and is popped on the beach. And I'm hoping your answer has been, your question's been answered with, yeah, both Simon. But if you'd like us to further elaborate, yeah, please pop that in the chat. Erin Millard says, interested to understand how the timing of the dredging is determined and if environmental values such as fish mitigation and environmental flow releases help determine the timing of dredge activities.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I'll just quickly touch on the sediment. So there are national guidelines and there are EPA guidelines as well around sediment sampling, and there's special limitations and parameters in which the chemistry of the sand has to be within. So we get that done between every 3 to 5 years, which is the sort of the time frame for the sand because of the frequency as it turns over. And some sites we do regardless, just prior to dredging. So yeah, we've not had anything that's been untoward on any of our beaches so far, thankfully, which means we've got some good environments out there. So and the second question, sorry, again, was around
from Erin Millard from Melbourne.
Timing.
Yeah, understand the timing.
A lot of our dredging is reactionary to a degree. We try to be a little bit proactive if we can, but there are a number of sites that we frequent, like I said, Queenscliff and Patterson River, we do quite regularly, and then Mordialloc. And we try to fit in the other sites on sort of more of a programmed basis. But when things like what's happened to Werribee over the last year or two, where it's actually built up sandbar quite fast and quite aggressively, we've had to try to fit that job into the program where we could, because when we come to Werribee, it's the longest navigation channel that we manage. It's nearly a kilometre long from the jetty to the outer marks, and it's very exposed to the elements, so we have to have good weather to be able to dredge there, and sometimes we need to wait for those weather windows. So yeah, so it is a little bit of a juggle, and we are somewhat conscious of environmental factors, everything from anything that might be nesting on the actual spit itself that we're planning to remove, and other bird activity, but also water flows. But we don't have the luxury of holding off for a year or something like that, or 6 months, unless we really have to. It's reactionary, so we've got to do it to maintain safe navigation.
Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Erin, but please feel free to elaborate in the chat. Chris says, it appears that the dredging is taking the boating channel closer to the beach. I now see boats coming in close to the beach before they enter the mouth of the river. And did you want to comment on that? Is that commentable?
Yeah, look, that might be an interesting observation, actually. The navigation, some of the navigation marks were actually moved out further from the coast, from the shore, and the channel has always been in the same spot. We haven't been able to alter that because it's actually cut in clay. So we're sort of limited by where we can dig there. What probably has changed is, to some degree, the coastline, and what has also happened previously is that we probably haven't done as good a job sometimes in dredging the channel or removing sand from the channel, and the beaches have sometimes been a little bit wider, a bit fatter, so there's more distance between the boaters or the boats coming past, so the sand has been allowed to reach out into the channel a bit more than we allow now. So we've been a bit more strict on where we cut it. Unfortunately, the position of the channel and where people tend to congregate on the shoreline there, there's not a lot of shore in that area, and yeah, it's probably something we'll probably, well, collectively as a management group in that area, will need to be looked at probably in the future.
Yeah. Graham's asked a couple of great questions. The first one does relate a little bit to the previous one around the amount of sediment that actually comes from the river itself, and I think Hannah has said that only a small portion of material is actually river sediment. So yeah, that's quite interesting to know, thinking, you know, maybe some of that sediment's running off the farms and what's in that, but from your testing you found it's only a small amount from the river itself?
There's a small amount that settles within the channel itself. I think most people, when they see that river on an outgoing tide and flowing, as soon as it gets out past the mouth, it actually makes an immediate V-line to the south across the mud flats. So, but there's a lot of sediment in that water. It does cut through an alluvial plain, so and that sediment will ultimately, just through motions of coastal processes, will end up mixed in with the sand and mixed in the shoreline, and that is why we have the sand that colour there. It doesn't look like Whitehaven Beach, unfortunately, but in the channel itself, we do come up with a little bit of sediment from time to time, but a lot of that is also a mixture of other organics and marine sediments that you get. The only time we did get a bit of sediment was during the floods about a year and a half ago, I think it was. Yeah,
okay. So I'm not sure if that was answered because I couldn't work out my clockwise and anti-clockwise, but yeah, Graham also wants to know, is the primary direction of sand movement past the river mouth clockwise or anti-clockwise?
That's an awesome question, and I'll tell you what, we could go together and do a PhD on this. I think the coastal dynamics in that area are quite intriguing, and that's to do with the shape of the coastline. So it's like the south side of the river is a bit undercut. So sand tends to, or mobility of sand tends to be driven along the shoreline in a northerly direction there. But what we do find, and particularly over summer period, is that on Werribee South Beach itself, sand is driven to the south. So the wind comes from the north. Sometimes, sorry, that's in winter. And in summer, it will be driven the sand will head north again. So I've probably gone and got everyone confused now. But yes, it can change a little bit seasonally there. But south of the river, the sand will traditionally come up from the south. And on the beach itself, Werribee South Beach, it can be influenced by north and northerly and southerly directional movements.
Do you want to say something, Graham? I think I can unmute you. I feel like you've got, I think you have to, can you get the unmute? No, can't hear.
We can do a PhD together on it, that's fine.
Well, I'm interested to hear how complex it is, but you did confuse me. Just once more, briefly, I thought I heard you say that in winter it goes primarily clockwise.
South.
Going south.
Yeah.
Oh, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the clock face? Okay, going south. And in summertime, it tends to go north.
That's what that's a theory, and I think I can't. I'm not going to bet a Mars bar on where the net movement of sand, which direction it goes, because it does come a bit north and south. But like I said, I think we've got some further study to do. Actually, there has been a coastal study done on that area, and I'm waiting for the results to come back on that one.
Oh, well, help you with a PhD on it.
Yeah, you're the man for it, Graham.
Thank you.
So Chris, further to the earlier question around the boat channel coming closer to the beach, is there a safety issue to have swimmers and beachgoers close to the passing of boats? Can we remove some of the sand to make the distance greater?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that issue has probably been there for as long as the assets there have been established and that area has been used as a navigation channel. There is it's certainly a no swimming area, that channel on that beach area there, and even the presence of people fishing can be a little bit risky, particularly if there are younger people as well. So we certainly don't encourage people to be fishing there on the channel. Where there's might be a murky water and a bit of a drop off, and someone that's not a good swimmer could find themselves in the deep water very quickly. I don't know if there's a work around that to actually move the channel further to the south. Is quite a considerable project, and I don't know if it actually would be something like that would be approved. I don't know if many channels are actually being constructed now. It's mostly existing channels that are being maintained as far at in this small scale sort of channeling. But yeah, look, it's something that we just have to encourage people to try to do the right thing around that area. The proximity of the people and the edge and everything, that's probably no different to fishing or standing on the edge of the jetty too. So, or any other element like that. So it just comes down to being safe around water.
Yeah. All right. One final question before we move on to Edward from John, Riverkeeper, who, very interestingly asked, can we see the testing results of the removed sand over the years, which would be really interesting to see.
That's not something we generally, put out there. They're more operational internal documents, but I can let's see. There are multiple reports that have probably been done over the years, and we're coming up to another set of testing round in this sort of next 6 to 12 months. So what we are quite happy to indicate is whether there are any changes or any issues that people need to be aware of. We're certainly happy to communicate that sort of information. And the specifics on it are quite technical, and it's something that this is why we outsource this to specialists to do the sand collecting and the testing. And the testing are done in a national lab to the national standards. So it's pretty sort of high-tech sort of stuff, but as far as the results go, we don't generally circulate that because they're operational documents. That's what we use, but we can confirm or notify whether there's any changes or differences to the chemistry or things we've had in the past. So yeah.
All right, cool. Might just move on, but keep posting those questions in the chat as we go. So we'll move on to Edward Allan, who's project manager of Better Boating. So it might be helpful with some of those boating questions as well from Victorian Fisheries Authority. So yeah, should be able to share your screen, Ed.
Awesome. Stand by for technology to catch up.
Yeah, there we go.
How does that look?
Great.
Awesome. All right. I'll just move some things out of the way. So thanks everyone for the invite to come along. I'll just be brief and coming to you from Bunurong country today. Very exciting. So this is our plan in collaboration with Wyndham Council, who are and will retain being the asset manager for the Werribee South boat ramp. We've run a few rounds of public consultation, so we have had community feedback on the designs for the upgrade, and those, I guess, any concerns or thoughts or feedback that we've received has been incorporated into what we are continuing on with the design process through detailed design. But just like to talk through some of the key call outs of where improvements are going to be made and I guess the background to them. So firstly, we're going to a 3-lane queuing system and the approach to the boat ramp itself. That's increasing it from what it currently is as 2. Thoughts behind that is to basically reduce congestion and lines along Beach Road so we can get more people who are launching into the facility itself lined up here rather than queuing further down the road and potentially impeding other traffic. So the more boaters we can get into here to line up is going to free up that space. We're including an additional lane for the boat ramp. So we're going to 7 lanes in total across the essentially 4 ramps, but 7 lanes is the big key there, with an additional holding structure, which is a pontoon to accompany the new ramp, and some improvements to the existing pontoons as well, just to try and increase mooring space for people who are obviously going to pick up or drop off their car once they've launched the boat. Further to the west, we've got a new or formalising the unpowered vessel launching, so that can be canoes or kayaks, but also a lot of the tenders that are moored here as well, accessing them with a new option to store the tenders rather than on a swing mooring, but in a sort of storage rack that Parks Vic is working on as well. The overflow car park area itself, the feedback was to maintain that and keep it as green space. So we're doing that. There's only a tiny bit of encroachment just to move some extra car parking to the west here, but that area is already kind of the really disturbed, damaged grass area. The majority of it just is going to be retained exactly as it is now, just with informal parking, so no line marking or anything like that. And as part of that as well, we're just looking at improving the drainage of the site overall too, just to help with ongoing maintenance, but also to ensure that the green space can survive and flourish. The Coast Guard will retain a car park for their rescue vessel and vehicle. There's a new turnaround bay closer to the ramp itself rather than sort of roughly where it is now, is much further down. So again, that's all to try and help the congestion and flow through the facility to get more people in and out without needing to line up for as long. And there'll be some de-rigging bays here by the toilets or thereabouts. So once you've retrieved your boat, you can basically pull around to there to put your tie downs back on and put your bungs out, things like that, before you head home for the day. Future works as well will include looking at extending the Parks Vic jetty that's just down the bottom of the screen here. And we're also looking at providing an accessible option for boaters who may need to, who may be limited with their mobility, just to help them access boats from this first pontoon. But we're still just designing how that might look and whether that gets delivered immediately when the ramp gets upgraded, or whether that's part of another package upgrade too. They're the main features of the upgrade itself. So happy to take any questions at the moment, but otherwise, obviously Jess has my details too, so happy to take any questions as if anything else pops up from anyone. This current design is available on our website as well, so it's open to for people to have a look at, but definitely happy to talk through any other questions people may have, whether it's tonight or in the future.
Oh, thank you, Ed. My computer charges come out. If anyone has any questions, I can't see any in the chat, so we will keep moving on. But yeah, if something comes up as we go along, please use that chat function. It's there for you to use. All right, so we've got Neal, who is the coastal planner from Wyndham City Council. And yeah, you can share your screen, Sue.
Hi there, I'm coming to you tonight from Wurundjeri country, and I've been asked tonight to just provide an update on the Werribee South Beach Master Plan, and to discuss the coastal adaptation framework which was included within the plan. So I'll just share my screen. I'll just bring up the aerial photograph here first, just to sort of discuss, I guess, the footprint of the master plan. It basically extends from the boundary of Graham's Wetland Reserve around to Wyndham Harbour, and the upgrade of the Bay Trail is a really significant aspect of the master plan. And then also the creation of additional nodes. So we're looking at a wetland deck or a node that would overlook Graham's. We're also looking at the creation of a fishing pier on the revetment wall where fishers currently fish, and then also looking at a key visitors node at the intersection of O'Connor's Road. That question about safe swimming is interesting. This area of the beach has been assessed by Lifesaving Victoria as the safest part of the beach for swimming, and certainly within the master plan, we've really focused on lifeguarding this section and creating improved access across the top of the dune here and then down onto the sand, ultimately with accessible beach matting, and the opportunity for people with limited mobility to be able to access Werribee South as a fully accessible beach. So I'll just stop sharing that aerial and bring up the master plan itself and the coastal adaptation framework, or the pathway. I'm not sure whether there are specific areas, John, that you would want me to focus on, or, you know, I guess if there's some questions in the chat, that would be helpful. The master plan was adopted by council in May. Since that time, we've been developing the detailed design. So the level of design that's contained within a master plan is fairly broad or high level, and we needed to expand on that level of detail and take that into what's called detailed design, which we have done. We've worked with a coastal engineer to understand our construction depths and methods for the wetland deck and the fishing platform particularly, and we've got a level of detail that allows us now to pursue a CHMP, so a Cultural Heritage Management Plan, which requires that higher level of design detail. So we've commenced work on the CHMP, which will be quite a lengthy process. So the Bunurong are the RAP, or the Registered Aboriginal Party, for this section of the coast. And they will be working with our cultural consultant to review all of the elements of the master plan, and to provide their feedback on a construction method that minimises disturbance to cultural artefacts. The design of all of the all of it really, the footings for the wetland deck and the fishing platform, the construction method for the path, even the choice of lighting. So we're going with solar lighting, which has obvious, greenhouse benefits, but it also means we don't need to do, I think it's 1.3 kilometres of cabling to renew the path lighting. It means that we can minimise disturbance. So pretty much every aspect of the master plan has been considered in terms of really minimising minimising disturbance to the potential for cultural artefacts. There are no identified sites within the footprint of the project that are on the Aboriginal register at the moment, but it's likely that there will be sampling taken, and we are expecting that there will be artefacts recovered in the development of the CHMP, and that will affect the construction method that we develop and the design of the footings around different elements. It might be that we move some elements of the design to accommodate those artefacts. We just need to work with the Bunurong to understand the sensitivities and what our options are for minimising impact. So we need a CHMP to be able to apply for marine and coastal consent to implement the master plan. So the CHMP is underway. We're assuming it's probably a 9-month process, so we've probably got another 6 to 8 months to go. And marine and coastal consent is likely to take probably another 4 months beyond that. So we're probably, close to 12 months away from being able to put the final design out for tender and being able to commence work. So these coastal sites are really highly scrutinised. They are, particularly from their cultural heritage perspectives, but also from an erosion perspective and from the desire not to disturb existing remnant vegetation. There's a real balancing act expected between the ability to improve public access, but also not to degrade the environmental values of the site. So I guess that's where we're at with the implementation of the master plan. Any questions regarding where we're at there?
I will note Suzanne's great point about more fishing line bins being included if new facilities are going up around. And Ed has responded to that, noting he'll raise it at the next design meeting. So that's great to hear. And then there's been a couple of points around parking, just that already, on a good day, it's chaos already, where if there's lots of new facilities, how is that going to be taken into account?
I can respond to that one if you like. Part of the implementation includes a parking and traffic study. Part of that, it came from quite a lot of feedback received during the engagement process about concern about road safety risk, particularly on really busy days, of people parking on either side of Beach Road and the potential for there to be an accident with kids particularly getting in and out of the car. The whole precinct really requires a traffic engineering audit of the space that's available for parking along the road edge, and whether it complies with the widths that are required, that are considered to provide, a safe with clearance for doors opening and people getting in on both sides. So all of the roadside parking really requires that audit, and it will require an assessment of whether it's compliant and suitable to be marked up more formally for parking. If it's undersized, it's likely that it's probably going to have to be converted into some landscape beds, so it's clear that it's not a legal parking spot. There's also a lack of parking signs that allow our local laws team to do parking enforcement, which will be part of the study. We'll also be looking at formalising areas, particularly on the north side of Beach Road beyond the O'Connors road intersection to see whether additional parking can be created there. So basically, all of those areas that have been flagged as being of concern will be assessed and determined that their suitability for the creation of or the use for safe parking will be assessed, and we'll be taking that feedback on board in developing the parking plan for the site. The other good thing was that in the master plan, we included the option of a seasonal overflow parking area within Price Reserve. So we'll be looking at starting that this summer. So there's currently a gate that locks off the grassed area sort of beyond the tennis courts. So we'll be looking at using that area for overflow parking. In the summer, Price Reserve is used pretty much once a fortnight for a cricket game. So the level of summer use of that oval is not high, and it's definitely considered that that one game of cricket could continue, and the community also being able to access that overflow parking area.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, some of the thinking within the parking space.
Just to stick with parking before we move on to the other few questions, keep it in theme. Chris has asked about potentially, can council establish marked car parking spaces at Price Reserve? Is that what you just commented on? As we already have a pedestrian crossing attached to the Price
Correct.
Reserve.
Correct. So it's not in the parking area itself. The overflow parking area is likely to be just defined fairly informally with bunting, and it's not intended that it's formalised line marking on the grass. This year was really the trial to see how that works. We definitely need to be providing some signage to flag to people that area is available. But I think given there is already a pedestrian crossing, I think it can function quite well, and you can sort of essentially be dropping off your car and decarring yourself really, and wandering across to the beach and enjoying that space. We will also be looking at whether timed parking restrictions are appropriate in some of those high use areas, particularly around the edge of Price Reserve at that O'Connors Road intersection, to see whether potentially 4-hour parking might turn over some of that parking more quickly in those high demand spaces. There's no intention for paid parking at all, but we do think that potentially there's a reason to put 4-hour parking in some high use locations with a view that Price Reserve's parking would be unlimited or not time restricted. So we'll be looking at that when we do the parking study, and the parking study will be referred back to council for review, which was the process that was agreed when the master plan was adopted.
Cool. All right, I'm going to move on from the parking things, but yeah, if any of the presenters feel like going and responding directly in the chat, feel free. John was wondering, he was hoping for a comment on the potential of a residential strip being created to the east of O'Connors Road, as it is imagined now, with the one house being there in the last year, or being built there in the last year or so by the jet ski beach, and the result pressure on further narrowing of this valuable public space.
I know that John has been very supportive of land acquisition in the past. The direction from council is very clear in that at this point in time, we're not pursuing land acquisition. It's felt that the cost and the time involved in upgrading the Coastal Crown Land Reserve that we already manage is demanding. on council reserves, and at this point in time there isn't a commitment to land acquisition. So I think, John, if you want to have that, if you'd like to have that conversation offline, I'm happy to have that. But really our position hasn't changed since we have discussed it previously.
Graham brings up a pretty poignant point in light of the latest prediction of climate-induced sea level rise of about 75 centimetres by 2300. Which areas of our coastline are at risk of inundation?
So all of the Bayside councils are waiting for the findings of the Port Phillip Bay Hazard Assessment, which is being led by DECA and the CSIRO, and it's called third pass mapping, which is a much more rigorous model that is being applied to understand sea level rise impacts. So it will assess the levels of inundation, erosion, and the impacts on groundwater. So it will really further the available resource that we have. So at the moment, we're using a data set that's about 10 years old, and it's called a bathtub model, which is far less accurate. I do have I'll just share my screen. I've got the inundation mapping that is indicated at the moment using that bathtub model, which has been integrated within the master plan. And it shows that I'm sorry about the poor quality of the key here, but that is what's available to us on CoastKit. But you'll see that certainly by 2040, it's indicating that these sort of darker blue, not the completely dark blue areas, will be subject to inundation. What we don't know of the current modelling is the depth of inundation or the period of time that it would be inundated or the frequency of inundation. So that's why we're all very keen to see this Port Phillip Bay Hazard Assessment outcome report to have greater accuracy. So in terms of inundation, our initial approach, and of course the approach will change over time, depending on how the scenarios play out, is to have developed this coastal adaptation pathway. So we're the first Victorian council that has developed an adaptation pathway as part of a master plan. And it divides essentially council's intervention between planning and then coastal management and engineering. And we've got some items identified for the present day in terms of adaptation around 2040 and potentially adaptation and retreat by 2070 and 2100. So at the current time, our focus is on using some of that available sand, particularly while it's within the coastal cell, to build up the height of the dune system, with a view that increasing the height of the dunes will offer some protection, particularly to storm bite. So in terms of sea level rise impacts, the periods of time that are identified as the most hazardous are those large storm events, potentially paired with a high volume of water in the mouth of the Werribee River, and a king tide. So you'd have the three factors coming together. So it's felt that building up the height of the dune system will offer some protection for storm bite, because we're likely to lose large sections of the beach through the higher wave energy. And of course, building up and revegetating that dune system also adds habitat value that holds the dunes together better than the existing situation where it could easily just be blown away or eroded through that storm energy. So I guess if Graham, if you want to download the document online, there's a number of interventions. We're looking to the state government to work with us. It's certainly not something that council can respond to individually, and all of the Port Phillip Bay Bayside councils are of the opinion that we're going to need significant state support to be understanding risk and then responding to risk. So at this point in time, there's a number of Bayside, Port Phillip Bay planning initiatives which I'm very much a part of, or council is very much a part of, where the findings of some of that research really need to be brought down into a localised, I guess, a localised set of understandings that then can be integrated into our adaptation framework moving forward. We're also looking, it dealt when the framework was established. We're looking for them to assist us to understand triggers for review and change of our approach. And we assume that that will be a Bayside, set of responses. So in terms of present day, we're very supportive of the use of the sand for beach renourishment. It's considered a very unique and quite sustainable system at the moment. We're the envy of most of the other councils around the bay. The El Nino weather pattern has seen significant erosion across most of the other Bayside councils. That we have had this volume of sand that has been able to be pumped onto the beach is a pattern that's completely at odds with how the other Bayside councils are faring at the moment. I've had calls from some of those councils wanting our sand. I've had calls from the Great Ocean Road Authority wanting our sand, from DECA, interested in whether we're prepared to send sand elsewhere as well. So it is considered a uniquely sustainable system that we're able to replenish an eroded beach. We're wanting to improve the amenity of the lawn area at the back of the dune system, so that if you were to come down on a hot day wanting to cool off and it's a king tide and there's not a lot of sand available, that there's a high level of amenity on the lawn at the back. We're wanting to plant coastal species that have to test their adaptation capacity. So not just the ability to hold the dunes together, but also whether or not they can handle that higher level of salinity. We're wanting to implement the dune protection works and to monitor the level of sand that's on the beach through the Coast Snap citizen science program. So we're a part of that program. We've got a holder where you download an app and you put your phone and into the holder and take an image of the beach, and that gets uploaded to the National Coast Snap website and allows a calculation of the amount of sand that's on the beach. So that's quite a useful way of citizen science, just continuously monitoring the level of sand that's there. And we're also wanting to see the existing groins and revetment walls, as limited as they are. I think that that's shown on here. So we've got the revetment wall here, and we have one small groin up here, which is highly eroded as well. So we're wanting for the state government to provide funding to support us to maintain that infrastructure. Yeah, so I guess that's, I guess in short, that's the thinking around the adaptation pathway, which given we probably won't be reviewing this master plan for 10 years, it as much as that's probably not a perfect outcome, I didn't feel like we could wait 10 years until the adaptation, the Port Phillip Bay Hazard Assessment had delivered its findings. I think it's really important to start having these conversations with our community that coastal climate change impacts will be experienced on our coastline. We're incredibly fortunate in that we don't have high numbers of residential properties that will be subject to inundation. We're quite unique around the bay in that respect. We really won't know what the Port Phillip Bay Hazard Assessment is likely to add additional detail around the later timing and impact of some of our coastal estates. But at the moment, in those earlier years of the scenarios, it's not appearing that we have residential properties that will be subject to inundation. So I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Thank you.
So any questions about any of that?
I think, unless Graham, did you want to?
Yes, I'd just like to thank you, Sue. That was a very detailed answer, and I also apologise for writing in the chat box 2300. I meant 2100.
Yeah.
In the future.
One of the screens you showed us had 0.8 of a metre by 2100.
Correct.
So that's already in the coastal plan.
Correct.
I get that, but I'm really interested in the CSIRO study.
Yeah, we all are.
But you're not expecting any action on that or any conclusions on that. Did I hear you say for 10 years?
No, that's no. The CSIRO piece of work has been due for probably the last 4 years. It's very delayed, and it's delayed because of the complexity of what is trying to be achieved out of that third pass mapping across the scale of the area. My understanding is that it's with the minister, the Environment Minister, so they're pretty close to being able to release their findings. There's huge impacts of the findings in terms of residential impact in any number of other bayside councils. So we know that City of Port Phillip, Hobson's Bay, Kingston, areas of Mornington Peninsula Shire are going to be really heavily affected, which have really significant political implications. And the caution in releasing the data, it is probably based on that. It's not in the earlier stages of the scenarios. I don't think that we will be significantly affected, but I do believe that as time goes on and more detail is placed around or is known, I do think some of our coastal communities may also be affected in those latter scenarios.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. All right, we've just gone past 8, so we might wrap it up. But thank you so much to Simon, Ed, and Sue for being here tonight and presenting for us. Thank you all for coming along. This is recorded, so we will pop it up online if you want to share it with your community. You also all have my email address, although very sorry, it was my Gmail. Our server has
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, that was interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Awesome. Sorted all the tech stuff out.
No, it's all at my end. I'm in a different office on using different tech. So, but yeah, I'll give you guys a call next week.
Yeah.
And we'll touch base again. So.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
That's all right. I better go and finish my job, and then I'll head back to my accommodation. So I'll go drive back to sales. So I'll see you guys next week, though. Okay.
All right. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.